Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Liz Crocker, and I'm a learning program developer here at the Royal BC Museum on Vancouver Island in Canada.
And my name is Ken Marr, and I'm a botanist here at the Provincial Natural History Museum, which is the Royal BC Museum.
And we hope that you are here to learn about alpine plant adaptations. So we're going to be together about 30 or 40 minutes. And but to begin, though, we're going to start by doing a proper introduction. So I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So welcome to Extreme Adaptations at the Royal BC Museum. And just feel free, if you'd like, to type in the chat where you're joining us from. We always like to know where you're coming from. And some of you might not be from Canada, so you might not know exactly where we are. We are on the territories of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations here on southern Vancouver Island. Also, these are the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, and we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live and learn on this territory. It's beautiful. If you've never been here before, we're very fortunate to live here. So there we are on the west coast of Canada, and that red dot, it shows that we are on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. Couldn't get any more west in Canada. There's a close-up of the province of British Columbia, and there's a close-up of Vancouver Island showing where Victoria is, where the museum is way down there at the southern tip. And this is a picture of the museum taken on a lovely, clear summer evening, not like today. It's rainy and gray out there today. And Ken and I are on the left-hand side of the building, way in the back. And so happy to join you today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. Let's see. Got any? Okay. So yeah, feel free to type in where you're joining us from. What we're going to do is start with, we're going to ask you a question. Does anybody have any ideas about what an alpine, because Ken's going to show us some slides and some pictures, because you've spent a lot of time in the alpine.
That's right.
And maybe some of you have, but what do you think an alpine environment is like? Go ahead and type it in the chat if you have some ideas. What are some words that might describe an alpine environment? So I think maybe, put some ideas up here. I'm going to show this is nice and big so you can see it. Snowy. I'm going to put alpine here. This is what we're talking about. Alpine. Cold. Anything else? Those are two good words.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, what about windy?
That's what I was thinking too.
You can.
What about trees? Are there any trees?
Are there any trees in an alpine area? Some people are thinking no. So good lead in, Ken, because we have a video we're going to show of Ken up in the alpine, where we can get a little bit more idea of what it might be like to actually be up in an alpine area. And then we're going to come back to this. So I'm going to share the screen again. Here we go.
My name is Ken Marr, Curator of Botany at the Royal BC Museum. I'm standing in an alpine meadow that very few British Columbians will ever reach. I'm really fortunate to be here, and it's a beautiful day today. It isn't always so beautiful in the alpine. We're east of Prince George and south of Fort St. John, close to Monkman Provincial Park, and we're north of Wapiti Lake Provincial Park. And we're here collecting plants for the museum in order to document the biodiversity of the province. And we make collections, and then they go into the permanent collection at the museum, and anyone in the world can view those collections, and scientists constantly are asking us for information about them. A lot of plants are already known. The species that occur in British Columbia are known, but lots of areas have never been visited. And so here in the background, you can see the tree line in the slope behind me. And the alpine zone is established above the tree line. So wherever temperatures are too low for trees to grow, the alpine vegetation takes over. It's a very slow vegetation adapted for rapid growth because of the short growing season, also adapted for getting wind exposure. Today is quite calm, but many days of the year it's very, very windy, and the tall stem would simply be knocked down. I'm sitting beside a little plant, one of my favorites, moss campion, because of the brilliant purplish pinkish flowers. It's not a moss, but it gets that name from kind of the cushion shape of it, and even the leaves might be reminiscent of moss leaves. This plant is an excellent example of adaptation and evolution in the alpine environment. Related species in this genus, Silene, are much taller plants. They could be up to this tall, even taller. But as plants adapted to the alpine environment, there's a significant advantage to being shorter. And the reason for that, as you might guess, or maybe you haven't guessed, is because the winds are strong and the growing season is short. So it's an advantage to be short because you're not as buffeted by the wind. And it's also an advantage to be short because the plant is able to produce flowers very quickly.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Wow. So yeah, that's pretty neat being up there, Kim. So is there anything that you heard, learned, something new in that video about what it might be like in an alpine environment? Anything that you heard Ken talk about that? Okay. So I'm going to put it, we got enough room there, but I'll put it right here. So, short plants. Low to ground. Figuring up. Okay. Anything else? Is there something else in there that you said that we should think about? Just seeing if anybody.
They grow quickly.
They grow quickly
because the growing season is short. As soon as the snow comes off, they start to grow.
That's interesting. In my mind, I think because it's cold, it would take longer to grow, but
they're adapted.
Amazing.
Even though it's cold, they're adapted to start growing as fast as they can.
So that's an adaptation to surviving in that environment.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ken, let's hear a little bit more from you. I know you've got some pictures in a slideshow, and you're gonna lead us a little deeper into that. So thank you for your thoughts on that. And I'm gonna first share the slideshow, and I'll hand it over to you. There we go. There's yours.
Yeah, so this is just going to give you a quick overview of the work we do. Here you can see different colors of vegetation, and different species are adapted to each of those different colors, and those represent different habitats. Some are windblown, the ridges, and some have snow accumulation down in the basins. So as it turns out, about 12% of the province of British Columbia is alpine, the land above the trees. That would be the grayish tones here. You can see much of it in the north, as well as some on the coast, and then into the Rockies. And as I mentioned in the video, and as Liz has stated, one of the adaptations is that plants are really short to avoid the strong winds, because they're in this environment where there's no trees to protect them from the winds. And they're really short, and they can, as soon as the snow comes off, and in fact, sometimes alpine plants begin growing beneath the snow in order to be able to complete their life cycle, which means flowering and producing seeds for the next generation. So most of the plants are perennials. That means the same plant comes back year after year from the roots or sometimes the stems. And this is one of my favorite plants. It's very widespread. It's very important for stabilizing the soil. But there are a few plants that are annuals, and this is one example. An annual is a plant that germinates and it grows and it produces a flower and it produces seeds all within 1 year, which is what the word annual means. This plant can do all of that in 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. Your tomato plants would not be able to do that. And so why, as we've been emphasizing, what are the advantages of being short and forming this cushion growth form? And what it does is, and this has all been measured by researchers that can collect data and temperature probes. So it's warmer within that clump. And remember, in the alpine environment, every day, every night, it could get below freezing. Every night of the year, it could go below freezing. So it minimizes the damage from the wind as well, and it helps the plant to retain moisture. So even though it's a snowy environment, a lot of the snow gets blown away from the high ridges. And so alpine environments in many cases are essentially deserts. So here is our favorite plant that we're featuring today, called moss campion. And that's what I was sitting beside in the video, brilliant purple flowers. And yeah, just a quick review on what are plants and what aren't plants. So fungi, mushrooms are not plants. Neither are algae. Algae used to be considered plants because they can photosynthesize and make their own food. But now the people who work on classifying the different forms of life consider algae, seaweeds, to be in their own kingdom. So plants can make their own food, most of them. And so that includes vascular plants such as this one, as well as mosses and liverworts and ferns and trees. So I think of moss campion as perhaps being British Columbia's most important plant. And what you cannot see until we get in closer is every one of those clumps of vegetation started perhaps decades ago from a plant of moss campion that colonized that gravelly slope there. And as you look in between those clumps, there's no vegetation. So moss campion has that amazing ability to colonize areas that no other plants can. And one of the reasons it does that is because it can form this cushion and protect itself as it grows from the elements. And even in this cross-section of the cushion, you can see some grass plants getting established there.
Can I ask, is the cushion what's underneath the green there? Is that what you mean by cushion?
Yeah, that's what I mean by cushion. Yep.
So it's growing on top of that.
It's growing on top of that, but it started as just a single little plant. Mm-hmm. And then year after year, it's been growing. You can see what a thick stem it is, or root. That could be dozens of years old, and it's trapping soil, and its own leaves are decomposing, and over time it forms this cushion.
Could you actually go back to the slide before?
Sure.
Yeah, because it looks almost like a lunar landscape. It's so rocky.
Yeah.
And this plant is, you're using the word colonize. Mm-hmm. So it's going in there and making the soil able so that it can grow.
Every one of those clumps. So the plant itself, or the moss campion itself, doesn't require much soil. But all the other plants that are going to come in after it gets established do require the soil that the moss campion is creating as it decomposes and as it traps particles of soil blowing in the air. And one of the things is that British Columbia was covered by ice multiple times during the Pleistocene. And so all of the vegetation got scraped off. Mm-hmm. And this plant came back in. And insects are a big part of life in the alpine as well. And many plants require insects to pollinate them.
I wasn't thinking of insects up in the alpine.
Yeah, really lots of them.
Yeah. Oh, and what was that?
Here's a marmot. So we're just going to do a few pictures of other life in the alpine environment.
A CB. Oh, now it's going through, I don't know why it started doing this, but here. Thanks, Ken. I'm going to stop that share because it's powering through. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. Now I can see why that moss campion is so important if it's like this species that goes in and makes the soil viable, able for other plants to grow. That's
what's really instructive is that one picture where it shows all those scattered clumps and no plants growing in between those clumps. And on each of those mounds are a whole lot of different species that are now able to get established there because moss campion started it.
Interesting.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So now what we're going to do, I forgot to remind you at the beginning that we're going to do this drawing activity. So now is the time to get out a pencil or whatever drawing tool that you have and a piece of paper. We're going to look at two specimens under our document cameras, and we're going to draw them because drawing helps you look really closely at things. It helps you focus on things. In fact, a lot of scientists, especially in the natural sciences like biology, use illustration to look closely at the animals or plants that they're studying, or algae or fungus. And so you're gonna get a chance to experience this. And we'll talk a bit about it as we're going along. I'll explain how we're going to do this. There we go. Show. There it is. Okay, so we're going to start with this. Let's see if I can make this little screen here. That is. There we go. That's easier. Okay, so I'm going to set a timer. Put your pencil, your paper ready. This is a moss campion. Is it a little fuzzy? It's a little fuzzy. Sorry about that. I thought we had that all focused in. We are gonna go in. We are gonna zoom in again. That's a little bit better? Yeah. Yeah. Oh no! Now that's too light, isn't it? All right. There we go. Oh. Okay. All right, start with this and know that we're going to zoom in and you're going to get a different angle. So
Scale.
Oh, right, I'm putting, look at that, a Canadian loonie. There, you can see how big that is. Okay, let me put my timer on. You can begin now. So you're drawing, I know you've already, so I'm going to make it a little bit less than a minute. So just, it's not, you don't have to show it to anybody. There's not going to be a test or anything. You're just looking at really closely at this moss campion and drawing some of the features as best as you can, so that you can see what are some features of a moss campion plant. What do you see there? Do you see any texture? You're going to be able to see texture a little bit better as we get closer in. Yeah, what else do you notice there? And so we put some links in the chat. I'll just mention now. There's one of them is about alpine plants. This is for our learning portal where there's lots of great resources about the natural and human history of British Columbia. But there's two pathways there about using illustration with science and how it can help when you're studying. There's my alarm. Okay, your time's up. So now what I'm going to do is go a little bit more in to get a different angle. And we are eventually going to flip it over so you can see that underside. Okay.
You maybe move it up.
Yeah.
The flower.
Yeah. Good thought there, Ken. Yeah. Now I might have to change the light here.
Yeah. So when we make these collections, the specimens are flattened, but we can still make out the features that we need for identification.
Yeah. So go ahead, drawing. Let me set my timer again. Already started. Okay. So while we're drawing there, Ken, do you want to say anything about those flowers? I know you mentioned they were in the video, they were in your slideshow. So these would have been the purple flowers?
Those are the purple flowers.
They fade with time.
Yeah. But this is how botanists all over the world throughout time have preserved botany plant specimens. They are collected in the field and pressed until they're dry, and then they're mounted on acid-free paper. And we have specimens that 130 years old that still retain all of the features that someone would need to identify them.
Which is amazing. Now, before we turn it over, just because you were mentioning that, I'm going to pull this down and see if I can get the label under the camera that you were So because each specimen, you're saying, all that data is collected and kept with the specimen, because we have researchers coming from all over the world to now, hopefully that is not backwards for you. It might be. So I'm going to stop showing that just in case, because I didn't fix that mirroring thing that Zoom does. Apologies. Okay, I'm going to flip it over now. We're going to look at the underside of what we were just drawing. I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay, go ahead as soon as it stops moving here.
It's a little bit more about the label. The information on the label includes the latitude, the longitude, other plants that were growing with it, what kind of soil the plant was growing on, what kind of rock made the soil, the date it was collected, and the people who made the collection, and the people who did the identification. In this case, it's me, but not always. So all of that information is really, really important to capture. And in our collection, we regularly get requests for information about our specimens or images of our specimens, and we do loan the specimens themselves. So for example, this week I've received 2 requests about information about our specimens from the Canadian Museum of Nature. So we're not, this isn't our collection. This is the collection for the people of the province, the people of Canada, and botanists all over the world.
It's a little bit like a loaning library in a way.
It's like a reference library and a loaning library. That's the best way to think of it.
Before we go on to the next specimen, though, since I'm going to use your little pointer tool, because this is the underside, this is the cushion part you were telling us that it's growing on. So, yeah. Can I get in a little bit? I think that might be as close as we can get, because, oh, no, we can get a little bit more. So that's the structure of the cushion under there.
And a lot of the leaves have decomposed and added to the soil, and we remove all of that when the specimens get mounted, because if there was dirt all over the specimen, it just damaged them.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you, Ken. Now our second last specimen for drawing is a relative, you said, of Moss campion.
That's right. And so the goal here is for you to compare a plant that is a relative of Moss campion but doesn't grow in the alpine. So what do you see that's different about this plant compared to Moss campion?
Okay, so
put the toonie back there.
Yeah. Is it focused? Hard to tell.
It'd be a little sharper.
Yeah. About that. And we are going to go.
If you move it up to see that stamp.
This stamp here. I'm worried that the camera is flipped so that they get backwards.
Yeah.
Because
every one of our specimens has a unique number, which is kind of like if you go to the library to get a book out, you look up the reference number. So what do you see that's different about this plant than the Moss campion?
Well, I'm sure people are thinking, it's sure a lot taller. That is not very clear. I'm sorry. I don't know what that is not focusing very well. Yes. There go.
A little flips. We'll still get the overall.
You can get, about 20 seconds more on this, and then we'll zoom in a little bit more. So yeah, it's sure a lot longer than that Moss campion we're looking at. But it's how related is it?
It's closely related, and even though the plant overall looks really different, the main feature that it shares with Moss campion is the structure of the flower. And if you were to look at both flowers, you would see they're actually quite similar if you looked at them when they were alive.
Well, and now I'm going to say that was our minute. So we're going to zoom in and we'll look a little bit more closely at those flowers. And sorry, did you just say something about the color they were when they were alive?
This particular species had creamish white flowers when it was alive. So the color's different, but the shape of the petals is quite similar to Moss campion.
And apologies, I can't show you the label right now. I think it's showing up backwards, but I noticed the date on this specimen Ken, there's this beautiful old script handwriting on the label. So when was this collected?
This was collected in 1896, and this isn't our oldest specimen, but it's among the oldest.
1896.
And I've actually looked at specimens from Europe that were collected in the 1840s.
Wow.
So as long as they're kept in the right humidity and the right temperature, they can last indefinitely.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you've got, I mean, I've been up where these are all kept, but they're carefully stored and...
Mm-hmm. And they're organized in such a way that we can easily find them when we need to.
Right.
Each individual specimen, we know exactly where it is.
Right. Which would be really important when somebody wants to have a look. Okay, now that one we can't flip over. So that's the end of the drawing. So I'm going to change the camera back so you can see us. So hopefully that gave you an idea of that the drawing helped you to look more closely. And please, when you have time, have a look on our learning portal and look at some of those examples of scientific illustrations of animals and plants. So to finish up, I mean, if there are any questions, now would be the time. You can pop those in the chat. Happy to answer them. But we will go back and finish off the slideshow. I don't think I see any pressing questions. So put our slideshow back in. Okay, so this is where we left off with, I don't know. All right, hiding that box. Okay, so if you have any questions about the alpine or our specimens in the collections, particularly to do with botany of British Columbia, Ken has graciously allowed us to put his email on there. So please, you can email him directly there. Ken Marr, kmarr@royalbcmuseum.bc.ca. And if you enjoy this program, are interested in some of our other, this live stream that we're doing today is similar to some of the digital field trips that we do that you can book directly for a group or a classroom. You can contact me at the museum. That's lcrocker@royalbcmuseum.bc.ca. And we've got those links in the chat for you. And yeah, the links were from our learning portal here. There's a quick way to get to it, rbcm.ca/LP. There's all kinds of teaching resources on there and lots of great media related to natural history and human history. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. And yeah, I hope I learned something about alpine plants. I hope you did too. And those they're not extreme adaptations, but they're adaptations to what we would consider an extreme environment. So thank you, Ken. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, bye-bye.